And welcome to the Food Show once again, and it is a beautiful day out there around us. Loving the sunshine. It is. Let's just take a quick check here. It is 11, I believe. Yeah, 11 degrees. Isn't that a wonderful, wonderful fall day? Glad you could join us. We've got an interesting show today, and I want to get right to it. First thing I want to do is say that I'm very pleased to be able to introduce my in-studio guest, the Cambridge Mayor, Doug Craig. Welcome to the show, Your Honor.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.
And you've been on the station a few times.
I've done a few things.
You've even hosted the show for a while, haven't you?
Well, I took over for Gary Doyle for one of the days. I've done that a few times. No, I enjoy it. But I've never been on a cooking show.
Well, we're going to cooking. We'll use that in the loosest sense of the phrase. Cooking show, yeah, we're cooking some stuff up for sure. We want to talk to you a little bit about Cambridge restaurants, specifically Marcello's, a restaurant that we visited together. We'll be telling people about what our findings were and maybe get just a general lay of the landscape there in Cambridge. It's good to get your voice here. Your counterparts in Kitchener and Waterloo have all joined me here on the show, and we need to get the Cambridge folks represented as well. So thank you very much for taking time out.
Always my pleasure.
Now, we'll talk to the Mayor, Mayor Craig of Cambridge, shortly again in more detail. But right now, I am very pleased to be able to introduce a respected scientist and, well, nothing less really than a Canadian icon. Many of us, in fact, grew up with him. I'm speaking of Dr. David Suzuki, who will be in Waterloo Region on November 15th at an event put together by the World Accord International Development Agency. Dr. Suzuki is chair of the David Suzuki Foundation. He is an award-winning scientist, environmentalist, and broadcaster. He is renowned for his radio and television programs that explain the complexities of the natural sciences in a compelling and easily understood way. Welcome, Dr. David Suzuki.
Good to be here.
I'm glad you could join me. This is a food show. We sort of work within the confines of food. So the first question I have to ask you is, are you a cook?
I'm becoming more of a cook. Remember, I'm the only son in a Japanese family with 3 sisters. So I was treated like a little prince, and cooking wasn't considered what males do, but being married to a feminist, that's changed a lot.
Okay. Well, we'll leave the feminism of it, but what do you think you specialize in? Do you have a particular fish? You like fish, huh?
Yes, because I like going out, catching them, and then preparing them and eating them. I think it's a wonderful relationship with food.
I think so, and it's sort of the historical sort of, getting a fish out of the water and, preparing it in a fry pan or whatever. It's just must have been one of the first hunting and gathering things that humankind, in fact, did.
Absolutely, and for me, it's the first memory I have from childhood. When I was 4, I remember Dad taking me out and going on a fishing camping trip, and so that's really infused my life ever since. My father always believed that the best way to connect children to nature was to take them fishing, and I've kind of carried that tradition on with my children and friends of my children, because, you have to be very careful, you have to observe, you have to know the behavior of the animals and what they eat and where they lie, and you get plugged into the natural world. I'm not a sport fisher. I don't fish for fun and let them go. I don't believe in that. But I think that catching the fish and then cooking and eating them is a very, very important ritual.
Yeah, I think there is a certain contemplation. It's a contemplative, reflective activity. And then if you're also taking proper care of them and then cooking and eating themselves, using all of the parts, it is a responsible thing to do as well.
Absolutely. We have such a weird relationship with food now, and I think that's what gives the power to programs like yours. And certainly I'm very excited about coming to your area in November to talk to a group of people there about sustainability. And really food, our relationship with food, probably is symptomatic of what's gone wrong with the way that we're living on this planet, but also holds out the enormous hope that we're going to find a new way of, which is really an old way of living in relation to the planet. I find that all across Canada now there is a real revolution going on in terms of food, especially in the cities, where there's much more of a focus on growing food locally, organically, and then sharing that fresh food with people, let's say, that aren't able to get out anymore, shut-in elders, disadvantaged people. there's some exciting things going on.
I want to pick up on that sustainability thing, because your image of learning as your father taught you, and perhaps his father's father, et cetera, goes back generations. I want to pick up on that in a minute, but I'd like to just pick up on the local aspect. If we were sitting down today, you and I here with Mayor Craig in the studio, talking about the idea of local food, even 5 years ago, I think it would be a fairly foreign thing to many people, at least in the larger population. What do you attribute this interest in that idea of localism and with regard to food?
I think the reality is that people are beginning to wonder what this globalized food economy is all about. It's great, you can buy tomatoes 12 months a year, but for 8 months of the year, those things you can bounce on the floor. They have no flavor or smell associated with them. People are really beginning, and a great deal of our food now is processed and packaged, and we know that processed food loses a lot of the nutritive value. There's something funny about the way that we've been relating to food, and I think starting with the fast food movement in Italy, this is spreading around, and we're realizing that food, in North America, we've tended to go for fast food. You just roll up in your car, roll down your window, give it to me so I can just eat while I'm on my way to making more money or something. And in Europe, food is a part of the culture. It's the social setting for family, for friends. We've kind of not developed that, and I think that we've got to discover that. And that's what I think a large part of it is. Our relationship with food tells us about the kind of communities we live in, reflects the values that we have, and people are realizing that fast foods and the same food 12 months a year is not the way to go, is not the right relationship with food.
Can you define for us what you see as sustainable food or sustainable agriculture?
Well,
what do those words mean?
It's a difficult thing, what is a sustainable system now, because so much of the very life support system has been compromised, the quality of the air, the quality of the water, and certainly the kind of soil. Industrial agriculture has radically altered the makeup of the community of organisms in soil. Soil is a living organism. It's not dirt. It's a living organism. It's a community of many, many different forms of life that make soil the generative, creative element that it is. We've come in with industrial agriculture and just hammered the hell out of those communities, basically trying to sterilize the soil, pumping the nutrition into the ground, and thinking then that it's just a matter of putting fertilizer, water, and sunlight, and we can grow the food that we want, while we've destroyed much of the soil itself.
This doesn't touch people, though, in the same way. I mean, it does touch people in a way, but it's not something that it's in the popular realm of knowledge. I don't think something like climate change, where people can get a feel for, like a tornado in Goderich. I hope those people can get back up on their feet as soon as possible. The idea of sort of the insecurity around food is something that doesn't touch North Americans as much as it does elsewhere in the world, and that's a pretty big gap, it seems.
But that is changing so rapidly. I mean, when people are realizing, first of all, that they're eating too much meat, and that meat is a health issue. It's not an environmental issue. It's a health issue. As they begin to recognize that a great deal of our foods are loaded with chemicals that are affecting allergies and asthma and sensitivity to chemical. I mean, we know there's something wrong with the food system we've got. And I think that's going to have an enormous impact. I mean, the locavore concept of trying to eat more locally, and what will drive this even more intensely, of course, is as the price of oil continues to rise, then this kind of global food system that allows us to eat the same food 12 months a year has got to collapse. It's just not practical. And the kind of industrial agriculture that's feeding our lifestyle is, in Mexico and California and all, this is going to be radically altered as the cost of fuel, the cost of oil becomes so high that the kind of industrial system we've got simply won't, it won't work. It won't be economic any longer. So I believe that cost alone is going to drive the local food movement.
Well, just to look maybe a little bit globally for just a moment, a little bit more globally, say 36 countries, or maybe as high as, I guess, maybe 40, 45 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, for instance. There's 800 million people, perhaps pushing to 1 billion people that are starving, that are food lacking in food and nutritious food. We need to produce more food. They say some people say as much as 50% more food to keep those people from dying. How is that going to happen?
This has always been the claim of the biotechnology sector, that we need biotechnology in order to ramp up food production so that we can feed the world's hungry masses. Well, first of all, I want to remind you that biotechnology is very, very expensive. Governments and investors are putting a huge amount of money into the biotech area. Are we doing that just to ramp up production of food so that we can send it to the most desperate people who have no money to pay for it? I mean, give me a break. Don't tell me that the motivation of biotechnology is to feed the world's hungry masses. It's not. It's to make money. And what we've got to do is, there's something fundamentally wrong when you have almost 1 billion people in the world suffering from obesity, and you've got 1 billion people who are malnourished and underfed. Something doesn't compute here. It tells me, does it really mean that we have to ramp up production by 50%, or is it about a more equitable way of distributing what we already grow?
I'm speaking with Dr. David Suzuki. This is the Food Show. Dr. Suzuki, what I'm hearing maybe is that capitalism is the failure here.
Well, I think we've got ourselves into an economic system which now is globalized, and because of globalization, it allows us to live far beyond the capacity of the land where we live to support us. We have the capacity to grow an enormous amount of food. People in other parts of the world don't have that. They can buy it from us. And economics then drives our increased capacity to exchange food, but it results in the loss of the degradation of the land around globally.
I want to throw.
I keep hearing music. Is that
no? That's okay. I want to throw the name Thomas Malthus out to you, and I'm wondering if, from a Malthusian point of view, I believe a Victorian era political economist, is the planet's population the main problem? If we have 7 billion people on the planet, I believe, just recently that number came to. Is it just the fact that the population can't possibly be fed by the natural resources that are here on the planet, that all of this could go away and be a much more simple problem if we didn't have so many people? Is that a deterministic
population obviously is at the core of it. And I'd like to remind your listeners that in biology there is a principle that the population of a species is inversely related to its size. In other words, the bigger you are, the fewer there can be. So if you're a whale or an elephant, your numbers will number in maybe the tens of thousands, because it takes a lot of resources to supply you with to keep that population going. If you're a mouse or a rat, you can have tens of millions of you because it takes a lot less resources. Humans lie halfway between. We are now the most numerous mammal on the planet. There are more of us than any species of rat, mouse, shrew, rabbit, anything. We are the most numerous mammal. We violated this biological principle. Why or how? We've done it because of trade. So it means that if you're in an area that's poor in something, you can trade what you've got with another area that's rich in that, and you can raise your population above the carrying ability of the place you live in. And then technology which enables us to hammer huge areas of forests, clear the land, and then grow more food, grow fish in farms and in the oceans and so on. Technology has also ramped us up above the normal carrying capacity of an area. So I asked the world's leading ecologist at Harvard University, E.O. Wilson, I said, this is years ago, I said, how many human beings do you think could be sustained on the planet forever? In other words, living sustainably. And he said, well, if you want to live like North Americans, 200 million.
Let's sort of start to end up now where we started off with the idea of local, your fishing anecdote. Local food, I find, is sometimes a little bit more expensive. There's a lot of benefits to paying more for food, yes, but some people can't afford that, and they need to go to buy, in bulk grocery stores, sort of Guatemalan red peppers, let's say, which don't look as good as some of the local red peppers, but are vastly
cheaper. I know.
How do we balance that out?
This is absolute insanity. First of all, we don't pay the true cost of what we're consuming. I mean, the notion in the middle of winter in Vancouver or in Toronto, I can buy an apple for under $1. And I'm going, hey, wait a minute, we're a northern country. Where the hell are we growing this apple? It comes from New Zealand. To think that we can ship an apple, grow an apple in New Zealand, ship it all the way to Canada, and I pay less than $1 for that because the ecological cost of the greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere to transport that over here, all the packaging, none of that is paid in the cost of that apple. So that the planet suffers from a crazy economic system that doesn't internalize all of the costs, the true costs. The reality is, if we paid the true ecological cost of our products, you would never be able to afford a strawberry from Mexico or an apple from New Zealand or sheep from Australia. We've just got this crazy idea that energy is cheap, and who gives a damn what it does to the air, the water, or the soil? We don't pay for that.
Dr. Suzuki, I can feel your passion and enthusiasm coming through, and it's exactly what I was hoping that we'd be able to hear from you today. And I appreciate that very, very much, because I think it gives people a sort of a real feeling right in the solar plexus about what's going on in their food environment. Why have you chosen to come to Waterloo Region on November 15th and be involved with the World Corn event?
I'm always happy to talk to a group that's interested in sharing ideas I'm fooling around with. What intrigued me about the Waterloo group was it was a broad group. It wasn't just a bunch of agriculturalists. It wasn't just a bunch of environmentalists. This was a broad sweep through your society, and that intrigues me because what I keep saying to people, I get a lot of kids coming to me and saying, how do I become an environmentalist? I want to save the future. And I say, environmentalism it isn't a profession or a specialty. Environmentalism is a way of seeing the world, a way of seeing our relationship with that world. And we need everybody to see the world that way. So if you want to be a plumber or a garage mechanic or an artist or a singer or a farmer or a teacher, we need everyone to see the world that way and begin to live in a different way. So that intrigued me very much about this opportunity, and it'll be a relatively small group, so we'll really have chance for dialogue because it can't just be a one-way street. The other thing that I haven't said to anyone, but I've always been intrigued by your part of Canada, because here we are, you're in the heart of the industrial area, southern Ontario, of Canada.
Yes.
And yet you have one of the most sustainable groups in the whole country living there. They're called Mennonites. And I've always been intrigued by the Mennonite community. Now, it's bound by, of course, religion, but it really intrigues me that you have a strong sense of community and you have a relatively light footprint on the earth, in that they are pretty well self-sustaining, or at least many of them are. That I find very, very intriguing.
Well, that's great, and I agree. I couldn't agree with you more on that, and we're very lucky. I think we're fortunate here, and I hope that people don't take that for granted. I do want to thank you for your time today.
Good to talk to you.
It's been great talking with you. We look forward to seeing you on November 15th. Bye-bye. That's Dr. David Suzuki. He is a scientist, environmentalist, broadcaster, and the chair of the David Suzuki Foundation. You can visit davidsuzuki.org for more details. He will be participating in the World Accord Local Food Dinner at Boreas Grill in Kitchener on November 15th. Visit worldaccord.com. We're way past time. I am Andrew Coppolino. This is The Food Show. Time for a short break. This is 570 News.
This is Andrew Coppolino on 570 News.
Got cooking. How's about
And welcome back once again to the Food Show. The second segment, we went a little long there, but it was such a great opportunity to talk to David Suzuki. I have watched him on television since I was a little kid and listened to him on the radio. Mayor Doug Craig, Cambridge Mayor Doug Craig, your honor. What did you think? What did you get out of that?
Well, I think just listening to him and his great depth of knowledge that the gentleman has, and I'm one of these lucky people that will be going to hear him in November when he comes to Waterloo County, and I think that's great. We're going to the Borealis restaurant, and there'll be a small group of people, and it'll be an opportunity for not only for one-on-one, but just to get an in-depth review of a number of his thoughts on different issues.
Long time mayor here in the region, and certainly, as Dr. Suzuki was pointing out, we're in a very unique situation, aren't we, where we have an industrialized, sort of urbanized environment, yet 10 minutes sort of either way, 15 minutes on the expressway takes you into some great farmland, whether it's Brantford, sort of down near your direction, or St. Jacobs here on the other side of Waterloo. In your experience, this whole idea of what is local and local food and the sort of movements, how have you seen that grow and evolve in your experience?
Well, I think we go back about 5 or 6 years. First of all, we have a market in Cambridge which is rated to be one of the top 10 in Canada. And the market has done a great job of bringing people together and bringing local foods in. So that's just sort of one aspect of it. Our council is getting into this whole realm of sustainability, and we go back 5 years and we built a new city hall. Mm-hmm. We didn't just build a city hall, we built the best eco-friendly city hall in Canada. It's a gold LEED, it's the only one, and it gets rave reviews in terms of how it not only in its appearance but how it functions. But getting into more of it, we had one councillor, Pam Wolf, who started us off about water bottles, plastic bottles. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we need to deal with issues like this, and there wasn't a lot of support in council. And so Pam and I discussed, where do we go with this? Well, we have to have a kind of grand strategy. So we implemented, Councillor Wolf and myself, a strategy for sustainability in Cambridge. Mm-hmm. And we've just done the corporate plan, finished this up about 3 or 4 months ago, and we'll be now moving into a community plan for the city of Cambridge. So those aspects are now happening. Not just in terms of the city hall or the market. We now have a Preston market that comes on certain days of the week, and we're moving into that whole kind of consciousness and dealing with people from a point of view that sustainability, the environment, all of these issues are tied together and relevant to each and every individual.
I'm speaking, of course, with Cambridge Mayor Doug Craig. He's joining me in the studio here today. We don't profess to call ourselves restaurant experts, do we, Mayor Craig? But we did have an enjoyable visit, didn't we, together at the Super Sampler too. That was kind of what I really liked about that was it blended that community people coming into the community, or coming into the city hall and supporting about, I guess it was 9 or 10 great restaurant food outlets. Right. From the city, and we just tasted some wonderful soups, didn't we? All for Meals on Wheels.
Yeah, it's all for Meals on Wheels, but it's a fun day. Mm-hmm. Bringing people together. I mean, when you have these kind of community events, it's not just about the event. It's about bringing people together, and it's about meeting people and renewing old relationships and a number of other issues. It was a great day, and we ended up doing the same thing we had done last year, was pick the same winner. The Bruce. Well, but anyways,
but not through any sort of
not at all.
I
wasn't involved. Anyways, but it was kind of fun. So I enjoyed that aspect. It was a fundraiser for Meals on Wheels, which is a great organization in Cambridge. I've gone out on quote ride-alongs with them. Right. And you get to meet people and understand the depth of isolation that some people within our communities live. And so that was a good part of it, and it was just a great day.
Yeah, I just love the idea, and I wish we could do more events in the community where we have these sort of communal meals. The whole idea of breaking bread together, companionship, and it's very historic. So it goes back, I guess, from a Christian,
genes.
But it predates that as well, and I think it's a great way to get to know people and get the community together. Are you a soup cook, though? Do you make your own soup?
Well, my wife does. My wife's a wonderful cook, and she has a very large garden in the backyard. And when we first met, I didn't really understand the whole concept of seasons, didn't understand really a relationship with nature. She's taught me a lot of those things by her influence with regards to the garden in the backyard. Mm-hmm. By
vegetable garden?
Big vegetable garden, very big. And the great successes and the few failures that she has. I hear all the stories about that. And it's really kind of great when you walk around the corner of the house, see this large garden just growing, and different stages, and obviously the crop that comes from it. So it's been kind of an awakening for me personally, and an understanding of the importance of homegrown local foods and the relationship we do really have with that.
What does she grow? What do you end up harvesting?
Last week it was mainly carrots she was digging out of the ground, and
Okay.
she had all kinds of bags of carrots that she's giving to all her friends in her card group. And peas and pumpkins, believe it or not,
that's
all
timely.
of those things, yeah, and squash, everything, and so it's just and it's over, and it's very bountiful. I'm very impressed by it and what she does.
Now, in your job, there's a sort of occupational hazard, I guess.
Every day.
Okay, well, it's specifically with
I have the hour of rage every day.
Jeff Allen. Specifically, I guess, with food, you have to go out at night. You have to visit different functions.
Yep.
You have to eat a lot of food that perhaps you don't prefer to eat. In terms of another chicken dish, another rich, mashed potatoes. How do you handle that? What do you do?
Well,
do you push it around on your plate, make it look like it's eaten, or?
Well, what I do is I remember something I read about 30 years ago when I first got into politics. And there's a small town in England, and at the beginning of term they have a bylaw, and the bylaw is the mayor and the councillors have to weigh in, and at the end of term they weigh out. Anybody that's put weight on has deemed to have done it at the expense of the public purse. And it always strikes me every time I'm out, because I'm on a circuit all the time.
Yeah.
What I do is I try to stay away from breads and desserts. But I am drinking a little more wine these days, so I don't know whether that's the age issue or the stress issue.
That's stress. What's your favorite thing to eat?
My favorite, well, it's very simple stuff. I like beans, believe it or not, baked beans, and that would probably be pancakes, things like that, sort of down-home, easy stuff.
Comfort kind of
food.
Yeah.
My wife would attest to that, and she tries to breach me in terms of different attitudes about other kind of delicacies. And over the years, I'm sort of moving in that direction, ever so slowly.
Is there anything you absolutely cannot bring yourself to eat?
Cannot eat. I would think I don't like cooked carrots or cooked onions for some strange reason, but I'll eat them raw.
All right.
Okay, that's basically it. I think most things I like, and I certainly enjoy the different meals my wife prepares.
Okay, well, look, we're going to get a little bit more in depth with your likes and dislikes when it comes to some of the restaurants in Cambridge, as well as your thoughts on Marcello's of Cambridge. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back. Let's talk about that. When we come back, let's talk about your sort of scanning of the landscape of restaurants in Cambridge.
My pleasure.
I'm speaking, of course, with the mayor of Cambridge, Doug Craig. This is Andrew Coppolino. This is The Food Show, and you're hearing it only on 570 News.
To eat. You might as well find out where the best food is. From restaurant reviews to the fun of food from around the region to around the world. This is The Food Show with Andrew Coppolino on 570 News.
And welcome back once again. This is The Food Show, and if you're interested, you can also pop on to 570news.com and click on the webcast button, and you can see what's going on in the studio. We do a live feed thanks to Greg Bowen in our video section, I guess, and you can see what's going on in the studio. Now, as for finding out where the best food is, the Kitchener Market in the downtown, Kitchener BIA present a food and drink expo at the Kitchener Market on November 24 and 20 to 26. It's open to the public. And it's a great opportunity to see some great food and beverage alcohol being displayed. Fooddrinkexpo.com is the place to go to get some more information about that. Now, Mayor Craig in Cambridge. I do get into Cambridge on a regular basis to eat at some of the great restaurants there, but I wanted to sort of get an insider's report on what you like, what you've found. We've got one in reserve that we'll talk about a little later, but give me your sort of general sort of scan of the landscape.
Well, interesting enough, we have some of the river festivals down in the downtown area. It's been over the years I've gotten comments, mainly from people outside of town, who talk about Cambridge and they talk about the river system, the heritage buildings. They talk about our restaurants, and they believe, and some of them have said this quite pointedly to me, that we have the best restaurants in the region. And I would agree to some extent, obviously, and very proud of that. And I've even caught a couple of Kitchener councillors down there a fairly frequent basis. I won't name them publicly because they could be out of a job next term. But anyways,
but you could name the restaurants.
I could name.
Or they might be out of business.
No. But anyway, so we have great restaurants, and I have no problem going around to a number of them when I have guests coming into town. And I do quite a bit of entertaining with different people and business community, nonprofit groups, and so on.
I've worked with a couple of them in terms of writing stories about them or coordinating on events and things like that. And I realized that through Main Street had some extensive construction over this past summer, which is obviously a difficulty. It has to be done, I guess. It's an infrastructure upgrade, but it does have an impact. As a man in the business for so long and with such experience, how important are restaurants to the health and well-being of a city, especially a city the size of Cambridge?
Well, they bring people together. They bring on an economic basis. They bring people to the city. I think there's a couple of restaurants there. I think the new Cambridge Mill restaurant obviously is a destination now. People are coming down to be there, to look at the river, to be part of a whole new kind of connection with the river and with the environment as they have lunch or dinner. And so I think those kinds of things. So from an economic point of view, they have an impact. People like the heritage of our area. That brings people down, so that mixes with the restaurants. And so you get this blend of reasons why you should be visiting. And people are starting to do a lot of that. And we're well noted for that. So we have restaurants on Main Street. We have a Cambridge Mill, of course. We have the Napa Grill across the river. We have small cafes. In the Melville Cafe in the School of Architecture.
Right. Beautiful
really
setting.
Interesting.
Beautiful setting,
And I go over there when I'm having a bad day, and I have bad days. Once, twice, 3, 4 times a week. Anyways, I'll go over
Appreciate
there.
Appreciate your candor there.
I'll go over there, and I'll sit there, and I'll have lunch there because there's young people there, and young people always make you feel better.
They rejuvenate.
They bring you up to a higher level. And I used to be an elementary teacher, and I can explain that fully, but. And then, we have restaurants, Cafe 13, which is well frequented, the Elixir, which is a really interesting small restaurant on Main Street. And then you move out of that up into the Black Shop on Highway 24. And you get all these great restaurants, great choices. We've got Drayton Theater coming in, so you have a mixture now of not only the heritage and the environment theater, but also theater, which brings in the restaurant aspect. People will come to theaters, and they'll have supper first.
There has to be that kind of a partnership and connection. I mean, none of these places can survive on their own. There has to be a network of activities and events and things for people to do before, after, during, all of that.
Well, it falls under the broad label of quality of life. You got to have the trail systems, you got to have the parks, you got to have the libraries, and we have a great library in Hesperle, as an example, which is a Carnegie Library under glass, which is really unique in Canada, won a Canadian award. And you've got to have the restaurants and the heritage buildings to attract people. And that's what's happening in Cambridge. There's been a change, and I see that change now more rapidly than I did a number of years ago. And we're moving in the right direction.
A little bit off the beaten path, and I think I've mentioned this to you. You remember, of course, Lily Ruth on Main Street.
Of course I do. One of my favorite restaurants at the time. Yeah.
He's sort of kept the Lily Ruth catering name alive, but he has this burger joint on Clyde Road. I guess that's Hespeler. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Called Little Louie's Burger Joint and Soupery, I think it's called. It's in the middle of a sort of a subdivision.
Right.
There's just houses around it, but I mean, you really must try it. Hand-pressed hamburger, handmade hamburgers, handmade. Beautiful buns that are made, I guess, at a bakery just around the corner, and great soups. He's an East Coast guy, so when you get a seafood chowder from him, it's a real thing. And this is just one of the hidden treasures, I think, of the city, and I encourage you to go and give it a try.
Well, we have a lot of hidden treasures, and of course, and you stumble onto these things, like you say, by accident almost. But there's Monty's up at Hespeler, a little tiny restaurant that a gentleman with no experience has put together, and you go over there, and it's just fabulous. I've been there a couple of times, and these are the kinds of places. It's the ones off the beaten track, the ones you don't really take notice of, that really have the secrets that open up your whole taste palette.
There's a place on the main the 24 strip there, the Golden Mile or whatever it's called Dewan. It's just a little Middle Eastern,
That's
little
correct,
place.
yeah.
And when you find one of those little places, they're very simple. They don't have overwhelming decor. They're just simple tables and chairs.
Straightforward stuff.
But you get a good portion size. You get a lot of interesting flavors and textures, weird spices that you've never had before, za'atar and sumacs and all kinds of very, very interesting foods that it's just wonderful to be able to explore. And again, 6, 7, 10 years ago, there wasn't this kind of stuff around. It just wasn't
as popular. Not in Cambridge, not at all. There's a change taking place. You've got Umbertals, who's been on Highway 24 for a long time.
Right.
And they have sort of these kind of, I don't want to use the term wild dishes of ostrich and whatever it may be,
emu.
But it's really interesting.
Unique.
And it's sort of, when you see it, you think, and try it, you think, wow, I've been missing something for a while.
How do you feel about the sort of comments that Dr. Suzuki was making about fast food? Is it difficult to deal with as a counselor, for instance, or as in the city running a city, to watch these kind of developments have to spring up in certain spots? Do you try to temper that at all? Do you try to push a city toward more of an elixir style of restaurant or more toward an ethnic style of restaurant, or is that something that is completely out of the realm?
I think it's out of the realm. I think what we do is we allow the community to define the type of community and the type of restaurants it wants by the very fact it will frequent the ones they think are good. Mm-hmm. So what you're getting now is more of a balance than you would have seen 10 years ago, and I totally agree with that in terms of health foods, in terms of foods that, like the elixir, as we've said a few times, that are very special, well done, and you see these differences now taking place. Uh-huh. So the community defines it by the way they frequent it, and for myself personally, I haven't been at fast foods for I would say 7 or 8 years, and that relates back to health issues.
Yeah, like Suzuki said.
And when it hits you right between the eyes, then you go, wow.
That's when you feel it. Okay, well, look, we're going to take a break because we've got to get caught up on our breaks. And when we come back, though, let's talk about Marcello's Italian restaurant. It's on Eagle Road, and we'll get your feedback on how that
my pleasure.
This is the Food Show. I'm speaking with Cambridge Mayor Doug Craig. We'll be back right after these messages. You're listening to 570 News.
Show with Andrew Coppolino on 570 News.
And there we go. The Rock Lobster takes us back into the last segment of the food show. This is Andrew Coppolino, and in my studio with me is the Mayor of Cambridge, Doug Craig. And it was great to have him alongside. Busy guy coming to spend some time with us for an hour here on Sunday. Cambridge restaurants picking up sort of where we left off as you sort of go down the hill, Shantz Hill, into Preston. You're going to run into...
you got Fiddle and Farkin, and you got the Grain of Salt.
A little further up,
Yeah, and there's another restaurant that has great breakfasts.
It's right on the main drag in Preston neighborhood there.
Cambridge restaurant?
Yeah, I think it's called the Cambridge restaurant.
And I've been in there a number of times, and you'll always find some of the icons sitting there. Councillor Kiefer always is in there every morning pretty well, and a good friend of mine, Greg DeRocher, the president of the chamber, things like that.
Yeah.
Those kind of things, and that's what makes a community. And you bring all these restaurants together that we've talked about, we end up with a place, a great place, great quality of life.
I think the thing about restaurants like the one you're describing, the sort of the coffee shop kind of breakfast bacon and eggs. It's sort of a political hotbed too, though, because you got people talking about stuff in there. So
that's where I hear about it. I mean, if I want to get a pulse in the community, I'll either end up there or end up at Tim Hortons for sure.
Oh, that's
I'll get it first thing in the morning about what's right, mostly about things we can improve on.
Okay, well, let's give a little bit of improvement, I guess, to our restaurant comments on Marcello's Italian restaurant, 2435 Eagle Street in Cambridge. Kind of I guess I'll let you say.
Well, it's out of the way. It's out of the way in a sense. It's not where you would expect a good restaurant to be, and I guess that's the charm of it. And you go inside, and it's got a very quiet, interesting decor. You're met at the door. The ambience of the restaurant is fairly good, but it's the food you go for.
Yeah. Do you get a sort of you're walking into sort of a European sort of piazza or some kind of a square with there's sort of some interesting design elements. There's a sort of the tile floor.
What's interesting is the cook's right there on the right-hand side when you walk in, cooking.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you notice. And you can talk to them. And I think that's interesting about it, but it's the food in particular. It's my wife's favorite restaurant, and we go there fairly often. But what's really good about it is when I go to restaurants, I look for the small things that other places don't have. The coffee at the end of the meal. You know, you go to a restaurant and sometimes the coffee's too weak, it's not very nice. Have great coffee there. And the bread they make homemade bread.
Right, they do, yeah.
And the bread there is terrific. And,
which you can buy a loaf on your way out as well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
Well,
Okay.
that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah. But anyway,
so what'd you have to eat?
Well, I had a salmon with, I hate to say there's something in it, which was great. And, well, I'm not a food expert like you are. Something in it which was terrific. But
Ricotta cheese.
But you have this kind of sense that you don't have to really inquire or worry about it because you know it's going to be good. And it was good.
Now, you said that there was broccoli on
asparagus.
And you said you didn't like asparagus, but you like this asparagus.
Well, this asparagus was pretty good, I have to admit. So and they do a very fine job. I ate most of it, okay?
Wasn't it a good presentation, too?
Presentation was great. The plates, the way they put them down, the service we had that day. But I think they knew you were coming, but that's okay. But I found...
Well, no, you knew you were coming. They didn't know who I was.
Who the other guy was?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel you made my day.
There you go.
But anyways, no, but anytime I've ever been there, the service has always been very good. And I think it's another thing that makes or breaks a restaurant.
Yeah, I had a really great soup to start with. It was a bean soup, cannellini bean, Parmesan cheese on top, some green onions sliced in there, which gave it a really dynamic flavor and really jazzed it up quite a bit. A little bit of bite to it, and very, very nice, and a little bit of cooked prosciutto in there as well. So it had a very meaty depth to it. And then for my main course, I had just a lovely mafalda pasta, which is a thin, I guess if you imagine a lasagna noodle, like about a third of the strip of a lasagna noodle, they grilled the meatballs, and this is what Marcel does very, very interestingly. He takes these normal expected dishes and puts a little bit of an added Italian twist to them, even though he's Romanian. But great tomato ragu sauce. He had a little bit of other bolognese sauce in there. So he had sort of meat two ways, and a really, really dynamic presentation. Very simple, very rustic, and that's the greatest thing about Italian food as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you know, it's kind of, I think next time I go, I'm going to have to make a list of all these things that I'm eating just so I can come on a show and be a little bit more in depth. But anyways.
What about dessert?
Dessert was, it's
Italian
tiramisu,
right?
That's right. And that's the best one in Cambridge, by far.
You think so?
Oh, by
you
far.
like that one, eh?
According to my taste, yes, it was.
Okay, folks, you've heard it here. The gauntlet has been thrown down.
Yeah.
It's a basic, again, it's a nice presentation, but it's not an overly fancy one.
Yeah.
There's some rich cheese, mascarpone
nice
cheese.
Yeah. Oh no, it was very good.
Yeah, and I had a funky little thing he does with a lemon, where he scoops it out and then he replaces the internal part of it with the pulp part of it with some sorbet. Right. Topped it off with some strawberry preserve. Serves it in a nice glass. I think I really respect what Marcel and Marcello's is doing. The restaurant Marcello's is trying to define themselves as an Italian place. They don't deviate much from that. They like the Italian, the Italian style of cooking and the different kinds of food, whether it's scallopini, whether it's a basic Caesar salad with its parmesans, and he does them in a way that isn't overly inaccessible. I mean, it's something that's attractive on the plate, but it's not something that's going to sort of freak you out in its sort of fussiness, and I appreciate that.
And I agree with you on that. And I think also very quickly, he's not concerned about location.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got the confidence of what he produces, what he cooks, and what he presents to make it work.
That's Marcello's Italian Restaurant, 2435 Eagle Street in Cambridge, marcellos.ca to get more information. Now, assessing food, atmosphere, service, and prices, dining out, restaurant reviews, and tasting notes on the food show are based on anonymous and unannounced visits to the establishments, except for the mayor. Restaurants do not pay for any portion of the reviewers or the mayor's meal. Well, look, that's it for the show this week. We're sorry we've got to push you out of here really quickly. Thanks to Cambridge Mayor Doug Craig and Dr. David Suzuki. Visit worldaccord.ca to learn more about the local food event, November 15th. We'll see you there, Mayor Craig.
For sure. Thank you.
Visit 570 News for an archive of past shows, and follow the Food Show at twitter.com 570 Food Show, and read my column in the Kitchener Post each Friday. Join us next week for more on the Food Show, including a visit with asparagus farmer Tim Berry and the Traveling Egg Show. Sounds intriguing. Remember, eat wisely and eat well. And thank you for joining us here on the Food Show, only on 570 News.